Okay, another favoured rig on site, or another bait on site should I say, is worms. They're very underrated. There can be a downside with worms. The only downside is that every fish will eat a worm. That can work in your favour though. If you have a big bunch of worms on and you get the small fish coming in, having a go at them, the bigger predator will move in to see what's going on, and that's generally how you can get a lot of cats. The rig side is very simple. Again, about a foot long, 18 inches long, on a running system. The resistance side of catfishing, people can get confused sometimes with the resistance. It's not so much resistance why you lose fish, it's change in resistance. I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. So you'd run this on a straight ledger system coming up. Worm wise, you're going to be looking at between 8 and 10 big worms really. Little Dendrobenas, not an awful lot of use to anybody. So get a good sized worm on there. Hook wise, again we'll use a size 1 for now. The more worms you put on, the bigger the hook. There's two ways you can pop the worms up. You can thread your worms on and you can inject a couple of them with air with a syringe. You have to be really careful because it can be quite dangerous. Obviously using hypodermic needles, you slip, you're in your finger, air in your system, you're dead. There's no other way to describe it. To save any threat of that happening, you get your basic rig, and there's two ways of popping worms up. This is the tried and tested way. Polyball, onto the rig, pull all the rig through, and you pull and you sit that at the back of the eye. You can pull the eye just in a tiny bit, like so. Just by pulling the eye into the polyball, you can avoid having any stops on there. Again, the more stops you have on here, whether it be a small lead, people use little leads, ledger stops, that kind of thing. The more things you interfere with this, the weaker it's going to get. And also, if it needs to break away, if the polyball can get down here without any obstacles to go over the swivel, the better. Put your worms on. Again, you can use a bit of elastic band just to stop them coming back off, or you've got some small worm, and usually it's for leeches as well. Leech rigs are a bit more complicated. They're not a very bait that's used an awful lot, so I'm just going to show everybody the kind of rigs that is more general. So again, you'd have your worms on there. If you're a bit unsure, you could put one of the stops down on the end and then put your worms on. So you'd have your stop on, trim it off, that's nice and tight. What that's doing is that's keeping the worms away from the point of the hook. You don't want the worms masking the point at all, so when the cat comes in to take the bait, he wants to take it, the hook needs to be prominent, so when you do strike, the point can go in and do its job. So that's a basic worm rig. The other way of fishing this rig is use the same polyball, same hook link, got a small piece of mono, a lot lighter, no more than 6 or 8 pound breaking strain. Tie that to the eye of the hook, just basically. It's a bit fiddly. Okay, so you've got this idea. Polyball again, pull this link all the way through the polyball. Now you can either just tie it off like so, which is the easiest way. Again, you just trim all these little areas up. And these bits here, just keep it nice and tidy. So they're not as finicky as a cart, so just keep it as tidy as you can. Same again, put your worms on there with your stop on. You'd cast this in, you can fish this on the surface, so when you cast out you let some line out, this will come and sit on the surface. Your worms will be 6, you can adjust the length of it, 6-8 inches. You'd also fish a live bait on that kind of rig. It's cracking for live bait, that is. If the cats aren't feeding on the surface, which they will be doing when the sun's out, but if the temperature drops a bit and they drop down in the layers, by tightening up on your reel end, the more you tighten, the more that'll pull down into the different layers. So in effect, if that's on the bottom of the lake, you can fish it that far off the bottom, you can fish it there, you can fish it wherever you want to be. So you can move the rig up and down through the day to find out where the cats are moving through the layers. And that's a good tried and tested way of catching cats. Okay, now we talked about a few different rigs, the pellet rigs, the worm rigs. Simon already discussed a different style of worm rig before. So there's obviously different variations. I'm just trying to show you a few basics that what I'd use. Again, if you go onto the internet, you can look at various different ways of people telling you how to do different rigs, make different rigs. There's different size polyballs you can use. You've just got to go really with what you feel comfortable with. The rigs I'm showing you do work on site. Again, like we've already discussed, if fish are hungry, they eat. Simple as that, really. Another one you can buy, which you can buy ready done. The rig is ready made. It's a dumbbell rig. Now they'd use this for worms and live bait predominantly. Check on where you're fishing if you can use live bait, obviously. I don't personally allow it on site. I'm allowing it on the Horseshoe for a trial period, should I say. Generally, like I say, a lot of places do frown upon the live bait, but it is a cracking method. So up on the Horseshoe at the moment I am allowing it, but just check with me before you come to make sure that rule is in place, because it could change at any time if somebody abuses the fact. So the dumbbell rig, again, worms and live bait. You can buy them ready done. If you want to make your own, it's very basic. I've got one here out of the packet. It's a bit of stiff tubing, polyball on either end, bit of silicone, and all you're doing with this, your main line's coming through a running ledger with a nice bead to stop any tangles there. Your main line, you pass it all the way through the boom, through the tubing, out at this end to a swivel. Putting a very short hook link on your swivel there, again with your size 1, your 1.0, whichever you want to use. Put a stop on, again, bait, another stop, keep the point nice and proud. And that's it, that can move up and down. So if you get a fish and you get any kind of problems tethered up anywhere, everything can move. If your main line breaks, everything can fall off, the lead can go, the polyballs can go. All the fish will end up with is this. Obviously fish care is a priority wherever you go, so make sure all your rigs are safe. Like I say, we don't allow trebles, wire traces, fixed rigs. Fixed rigs cause fish deaths. Nobody likes to see a dead fish tethered up in a tree somewhere. Some of the rigs I see on this place are horrendous. So just keep it nice and basic and simple. Everything can fall away if it needs to do. A 40 plus cat, a 30 plus cat will fight harder than you can imagine. So just be prepared. £15 main line, £18 main line, something like that. Don't 10-12 pound main line isn't enough for catfishing at all. So again, back to the rig, very basic. You run it through, down. When you cast that in, that's going to sit on the lake bed, like so. You let some line out, this will sit on the surface, but your rod will be over here, your bait will be there, and what you get there, the cat can move up. There's no main line anywhere, it won't pick it up, it won't sense the line, it'll take the bait confident, and that'll slide away when you get your take. Like up on the Horseshoe where you've got some weed, like various places all over the country, if you find your clear spot, you can fish that. If there's any weed under here, it won't matter because your rig and your bait will be away from the weed. So it's a cracking rig for fishing weedy waters, that. And again, with your cats, when they've been fished for a long time, they do get wary of line. So again, that can be fished. Your main line is well out of the way of everything, so your cats will move in, have a look, and hopefully take the bait. So that's the dumbbell rig.